Hillary campaigning in our area, trying to finally shake off Bernie Sanders. Sanders' campaign lamenting early mistakes that it made that could have actually made him stronger where we stand today. Is it possible if Bernie acted differently early on, he actually could be the front runner now? Then a look at convention dysfunction, how the Republicans scrambling behind the scenes to block one Donald J. Trump. Also, after yet another deadly Amtrak collision, our crumbling infrastructure once again becoming a big issue. Question is, though, what can be done about it? Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday evening. Well, Hillary Clinton, she's back in New York today as she tries to put more daylight between herself and Bernie Sanders. She attended a rally at the Javits Center to celebrate Governor Cuomo's signing of the $15 minimum wage into law. And she's also speaking to a pretty friendly crowd.
This is such a great day for our state. This is a real watershed. Just as you heard the governor say, it's a result of what is best about New York and best about America.
So with 2 weeks out before the New York primary, Hillary holding a solid double-digit lead, down a lot from where it was a month or so ago, but still nonetheless a solid lead. But you turn to the next primary state, Wisconsin, where tomorrow is primary day. Bernie holding a slight lead in the polls. And perhaps if he ran his campaign differently in the early days here, he could be going into Wisconsin at least neck and neck, maybe even in the lead. Times had this to say on its front page article today called "Early Missteps Seen as a Drag on Sanders' Bid." It says, in part, quote, "He was originally skeptical that he could beat Mrs. Clinton, and his mission in 2015 was to spread his political message about a rigged America rather than do whatever it took to win the nomination. By the time that he caught fire with voters, she was already on her way to building an all but insurmountable delegate lead." Let's get our panel to talk about this and so much more. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College and professor of campaign management at NYU. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Jerry McKinstry is here. Jerry, recently named managing director of the November Team, a Republican-leaning political consultant group run by good friends of the show, Bill O'Reilly and Jessica Proud, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Andrew, you think this is revisionist history or convenience? But the more that they say was they never wanted to make enemies of Hillary. They thought that they would just bring in a plank of the party that they felt was ignored not just by her, but by the party for too long, the left wing. And now that it's taking off, they wonder, because of the math, and even potentially with a good Wisconsin, it's going to be really, really hard for him to make up the ground. Could they have done something in the first quarter of this race that would have changed the dynamic?
Well, first of all, I think it's illustrative that you're getting a post-mortem on the Sanders campaign while the Sanders campaign is still going on, which gives you an idea, I think, in the Sanders inner circle that they pretty much well know that the game is just about over.
Do they, though?
I think so. I think it would take a remarkable turn of events plus the swaying of the superdelegates in order to get Bernie Sanders the nomination at this point. And I think that's a little, I mean, it's still plausible. It's just unlikely. As for what he could have done differently, obviously if he had attacked Hillary early on and really done more of a conventional campaign, he might have been able to move the needle in that regard. But remember, one of his big breakthrough moments was in the first debate where he said to Hillary Clinton, "I'm sick of your damn emails." He had that honest sensibility of not being your standard politician. And I think that's one of the things that's resonated with voters, and that wouldn't have been there if he had been a more standard tactician or early on in this race.
And I also think people forget that Martin O'Malley and him were considered kind of the same in terms of a threat to Hillary in the beginning. But Dominic, you were there in the Bronx, okay, where they drew close to 20,000 people. The expectation is after tomorrow night in Wisconsin, win or lose, he comes to New York, he'll be able in high-profile areas where all the cameras are going to be, and you're going to be there yourself, he'll get huge crowds again. Is it more, you think, his appeal that we're seeing now, that we've underestimated him as a messenger, that he's actually able to not just do the sound bites, but to really get the crowd going? Or is it that more people just don't like Hillary Clinton, even if they respect her more than we maybe remembered or imagined from 8 years ago?
A combination of both. Folks, there's no other way to say this. Many Democrats are frankly going to be holding their nose supporting the former Secretary of State and New York senator for 8 years. She's on her home turf. Remember this prediction, Richard. Bernie Sanders is going to make New York a real contest, and he might win. Standing out there in St. Mary's Park in the South Bronx, he's okay. Let me backtrack. He's talking about things that he can't deliver on. Let's be honest about that. Let's be upfront about that. But he has a populist theme, and the guy, and it was cold that night, and he went on for 45, 50 minutes. I understand why he doesn't have a voice. He touches on everything to connect with everyone. Affordable housing, health care, alleged police brutality, on and on and on and on and on. And so he connects, Richard, in a great way. I still think he can make a race out of this. As Andrew indicated, it's going to be tough. But I underestimated him to begin with. I thought he was a complete joke, a socialist out of Vermont. I don't think that anymore.
Do you think, Jerry, his self-labeling as a socialist, which everybody thought was a disqualifier in the beginning, including everybody at this table, like, okay, has helped or hurt him here define both himself and then also, try and identify himself to voters?
I think Bernie Sanders' strength is his authenticity. I mean, he is who he is, and he puts it on the table. And when he talks, he doesn't, try and sell himself as anything but who he is, which is a socialist, a democratic socialist is what he calls it. But it seemed to work for him. Everyone, as you mentioned, underestimated him. I too. I remember being in college, and there was a socialist from Vermont, and I was like, how did this guy get in Congress? So I mean, but he is, again, he speaks. I know Republicans, conservatives appreciate that he is authentic and he speaks his mind and he speaks what he believes.
And there's no parsing, and he didn't seem to be coming on the bandwagon. Now he's always believed this. But Jeannie, you've looked at the math and the polls and where he's getting support from the youth here, and the gender breakout that a lot of people assumed at the beginning that women would break for Hillary in the way that she'd be a historic candidate, similar to how Obama was a historic candidate 8 years ago, hasn't materialized. But she can play four corners now for the rest of this sports term on the championship night for the NCAA.
You lost me there, Richard. I have no idea what that means.
If you just played along, I would have brought you on. You could have nodded like what I was talking about. But basically, she's going to play a stall game here. She's got to make sure she doesn't insult Sanders on the way out or her supporters. Hope that she can bring them under the tent, in Philadelphia when they have the Democratic convention, assuming she's the nominee. But can she just do that? Does she need to go really negative against him, and even more so than she has, or has she already built up enough of a margin that she can be gracious here between now and then?
I think the finger wagging the other day is an indication that the Clinton campaign is sweating this. And it's very clear, because the Sanders campaign has said it, if they don't win Wisconsin tomorrow, they are done. There is no real path forward. Even if he beats her in New York, a loss in Wisconsin.
By the way, the numbers I saw, I thought it was a walkthrough for Sanders. It's within the margin of errors if you believe the latest polls between him and her.
It's within the margin. And so, they're saying he needs to win Wisconsin. You take them at their word. But I think that the idea that when we saw her wagging her finger was essentially telling us that they are really sweating this one out. If he wins Wisconsin and then he has 2 weeks on the ground, as Dominic mentioned, he is drawing huge crowds. Yeah. Everybody I know who, like Dominic, saw him and saw Hillary Clinton says there's no comparison in terms of the energy he had on the ground. Now, that's not to say she would lose New York, but imagine even in her home state where she was senator and where her headquarters is, he gets within some
kind of
indictment
on her or a compliment to him.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's a little bit of both, and I think it portends where the Democratic Party is headed. Unfortunately for Bernie Sanders, I agree with Andrew, the math is an uphill battle for him, but this is where the Democratic Party is headed in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. They're going to be increasingly progressive, and it's New York City who's elected this really progressive mayor. And so he is going to play in New York. 2 weeks on the ground he has. They're going to be debating I don't know how many times, if at all. But that's going to be really telling. So I think that the Clinton campaign has a right to be nervous on this. If he loses in Wisconsin, they can take a little breath. But if he wins, they have a huge 2 weeks before them that she has got to win New York.
But Jeannie, to your point, and just adding to it, I think that the Democratic Party is moving further to the left, but it's not as far left yet as where Bernie Sanders is. I think Hillary might actually be to the right of where most Democratic voters are, and so the bulk of that support is somewhere between them. But it's a combination of the message playing well, the messenger playing well, and then also some negative blowback against Hillary Clinton. But the Democratic Party is not as progressive as Bernie Sanders
No, I
is
think you're
yet.
absolutely right, and that's why I think he's almost just a little bit ahead of his
But
time
also,
in a
I
few
hate to let
years.
facts get in the way of a good story. I know
Don't do
people.
that.
I know of people within the Clinton campaign who are livid that it's been tolerated by the media. This fiction that what Sanders is selling could ever be delivered on. People at the rallies that you went love the idea of free college education without any student loans. I'm for motherhood and apple pie too. Doesn't work that way. They provide the idea we're going to throw out Obamacare, start all over again with single payer. It will never ever happen. Look at what our country went through to just get Obamacare. You're going to strip that and start all over again? None of it. This is pure fiction. This stuff.
Richard, you are 1,000% correct in terms of he gives you a full plate of whatever you may be interested in on the stump, whatever you
And he said
concentrate
something
on.
interesting today that I hadn't heard. He said, she keeps saying, meaning Hillary Clinton, this is Sanders, that we can't do this, we can't do that, they're politically impossible. Well, what's wrong to dream? And I'm like, okay, but it's not a college course. You're electing the commander-in-chief here who's got to actually live in the real world, right? With a Republican-controlled Congress and everything else. I think it's interesting that he's had this dynamic and this appeal to the public, but like so much in this insane election year, facts be damned.
But Richard, the Clinton folks are afraid because her firewall has always been the African American community.
And they're
Guess
still with
what? Yeah, guess what? Bernie's making inroads with black voters in New York State.
Okay, now the SNL sketch poking fun at Donald Trump got big laughs on Saturday night, but could the Republican Party get the last laugh on the Donald as it tries to block him? We'll get into that straight ahead.